we'll go live, yep, on your say. So if you wish to open the meeting, yep, we'll get going.
Yep,
Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Yep. Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee on the 22nd of June 2023. We're obviously on Teams, and hopefully everybody is able to get access. If we have a difficulty in terms of the Teams connection and any of the members of the committee drop off, then we will have to wait until we can get reconnected so that we're core-8. So I wouldn't say the usual somebody else will step in if I get thrown off. If any of either Paul, Katrina or myself get thrown off, then we'll have to wait until we get back on again and we're core-8. Okay. So can I just ask if there are any apologies? I'm aware of apologies from Katharina Casper and Grant McRae. Is there anyone else, Karen?
I know that's all the member apologies, just Grant and Katarina.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. And item 1.3 is a minute of the meeting that we had on the 31st of March, and that's here for approval. Is everybody content to approve that? Okay, thank you very much. There's also an action log at item 1.4 with 2 actions which are ongoing, hopefully to be concluded by August, and 5 recommended for closure. Members content to agree that? Okay, thank you very much. And it is proposed that 2 items of business, well, items 6 through to 8, be taken in private. Is the committee content to approve that? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, we get to our first substantive item, which is item 2.1, 3 internal audit reports. And I think this is a report that's been brought to us by John McNellis and Gary Devlin from ASEX. So I'm not sure who's going to start with the presentation of this. John?
Thank you, Chair. I think we'll just pass straight to Gary to take you through each of the reports individually.
Okay. We're just saying to Gary just before we came online there that this is his final meeting with us. So over to you, Gary.
Yes,
Chair,
thank you, Chair.
Gary, sorry, very sorry to interrupt. Can we just pause just a second? I just think there's a couple of issues with the live stream. I don't think we're live at the moment, so are we okay to just pause just for a couple of minutes just while I figure out
of course.
back online? Apologies for interrupting.
Not at all.
Yeah, we're live, so
we're live now.
Interrupting, just wanted to double check there, but all okay.
Okay. Well, welcome to anybody joining this meeting of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee on the 22nd of June 2023. We've dealt briefly with the standing items, so we have apologies from 2 of the board members, Katharina Casper and Grant McRae. No declarations of interest. The minute of the meeting held on the 31st of March has been approved. The action log has been approved, and it has been agreed by committee that items 6 to 8 on this agenda will be taken in private. So the first substantive item, internal and external audit reports, item 2.1, internal audit reports, and Gary Devlin from ASEX will present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we have 3 reports from internal audit today. One is on the digital evidence sharing capability project, and I'll talk about that in a second. And the other 2 are about the RDU program, and then we have one on forensics case file management. So the first one on digital evidence sharing capability project. What we found in this is that maybe I should give some background to this for members, but Police Scotland have inherited this project from Scottish Government. It's essential for the effective working of the whole justice system because it digitises evidence and it's being managed from within Police Scotland. What we found in that project was that the overall project design, the programme project control arrangements were well managed, they were well designed, they were robust, and that framework was a good framework. So it followed all of the expected design principles that we would look for in an audit of that type. But we also found that the process was suffering from a really critical issue around the skills and resources within the team. It just didn't have enough people to enable it to make the progress that Police Scotland itself would desire to make. And that was impacting on the overall outcomes within the project. So they didn't have time to get round to implementing all of the recommendations from a range of reviews which were impacting on that project and also impacting on the project's ability to meet its timeline. And finally, really for the project to demonstrate that it was delivering all of the success criteria that had been set out at the outset. But the underlying issue around that is not about the design of the project. It's simply, not simply because it's a really significant issue, it is about how many people Police Scotland are able to commit to delivering that. Chair, the report is long and complex. It contains quite a lot of detail, and I'm very conscious of the guidelines before the meeting to really focus on the high-level areas. So I'm going to assume that you've read the detail of that report, and you can see how management have responded to internal audit's recommendations. And I'm happy to take any questions on that outline.
Thank you very much, Gary. Yes, it's helpful to note that 5 of your 8 recommendations have already been addressed, and 2 will hopefully be completed by the end of the month, with the final recommendation scheduled, as I see from your report, by October. So we'll keep an eye on that, obviously, but I think you've given us some reassurance here, but also some helpful comments about the issue of resourcing and capacity within the team trying to deliver this project. So with that, I'll open it up to members of the committee. If there are any questions, we do have an item on the agenda later today which will allow us to go into more detail in terms of the current position of the project. So this discussion is really about the findings of your audit. Anybody want to come in at this stage? Okay, well, and if not, I think we will simply note then that there are 2 high-risk recommendations, and that the underlying issues of capacity and resourcing need to be resolved. So we'll be coming back to these issues when we get to that item later on in the agenda. And if nobody has anything else, thank you very much for that report, Gary. Moving on to the next one, which is change management organisational design.
Yeah, so this is around the resource deployment unit, which is a critical design unit within Police Scotland. It's the unit that allocates police officers on a daily basis to areas of need. So it might be affected by a big event, but it's making sure that abstractions from duty, maybe to go to court or to do prisoner escort duties, or maybe because people are off ill or whatever it might be, that you constantly have a safe level of policing in each area across the country. So it's absolutely critical, and it's critical for efficient and effective workforce management and deployment. And if it doesn't work well enough, it affects cost in quite a significant way. So it will affect things like overtime costs, which are a significant part of Police Scotland's budget. So it is a critical aspect of operational policing. What we found when we looked at this area, and Police Scotland themselves knew that the area needed to be reviewed, and they come up with a business case for doing that. One of the things we found is that there isn't a consistent way of managing workforce needs at an operational level across Scotland. So it depends on which region you're in, which system you use, and that's largely a legacy force issue. So some of the legacy issues before Police Scotland was formed have yet to be addressed. Within that, there are also system issues. We found it to be heavily people reliant on spreadsheets, and it's a really complex 3D jigsaw model you have to You have to work through it to make everything work well. And that was creating inefficiencies within individual policing areas. And when we were looking at the business case for addressing all of those issues, the business model that initially had been put forward would have required about 100 more police officers to enable it to be delivered. And that's simply not tenable in the current climate. And one of the key issues we found is that we should have been looking at options for introducing systems and IT to maybe automate more of those processes, very people-based. And we should have been looking at getting the process right before imposing a system on existing processes. So having a single way of doing RDU across the whole of the Police Scotland regional workforce deployment would be a better way to then roll out efficiencies and improve ways of working. And if you can get those things right, I think there is a significant prize there around more efficient practices, more effective practices. And I think we should see some efficiencies in terms of, for example, overtime, which may well pay for some of the investment that you may need to make in terms of systems. Again, it's a very detailed report. It's a hugely complex area. And I think I would like to thank also the RDU team for their engagement with us through the audit, because they really were very patient with the internal audit team and helping us understand the complexities involved in this and how difficult it is to get right. And I think they're going to be coming forward with a much improved plan for next steps, which is the key thing. So I have to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Gary. It is a very good report. It's very detailed, and it was, as you say, highlighted by Police Scotland as an area that would benefit from internal audit activity. So I'm sure they have valued the input that you've already given them, and this report will help them move that forward. But we do have Chief Superintendent Alan Waddell and Stevie Diamond from Police Scotland with us on the call if they wanted to add anything at this stage.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Gary's he's outlined the case exactly as it is, and it's much appreciated. I'd like to thank him and his team for the manner in which they've engaged with us in the division. It was definitely much appreciated. And I should say I'm here representing Mark Williams, the ACC, who's the SRO for this project. Stevie's joining me with a wealth of experience in resource deployment. But the challenges are exactly as Gary's outlined. We have got an RDU which is effectively unrestructured largely since we became into inception. And in the north and east of the country, you've got established RDU functions which work well. And in the west, which is roughly 50% of the demand, it's largely done by frontline managers, which brings with it some inefficiencies and means that they're not focused upon the service to the public that we would like them to be doing in those areas. And there's been efforts from the team since the inception of Police Scotland to bring national consistency, national standards, but such is the disparity in the structures across the country that's incredibly hard to deliver. And the operational challenges which Gary and his team have outlined in the report are absolutely recognised by the SMT, and in fact everybody that works within the resource deployment unit, and it's actually incredibly helpful that they've been articulated in this report, and it brings a little bit of weight to what the resource deployment function has been arguing. The management response to the recommendations there, if I'm being honest here, I apologise for this, has been a little bit light in what we put down in terms of particularly about the very high recommendations. And we've got a much more detailed response which we'll submit to that because they've been taken seriously, and Gary's report provides the basis for us moving forward. I should pay tribute to the people that work in the resource deployment unit. I don't get a chance to speak very publicly about them, to speak often about them in public, but they are absolutely the unsung heroes of policing. They make sure that we have people where we need them, when we need them, and they deliver under incredibly challenging situations. But the structures don't work, or they're not sustainable. And Gary has, and the team have highlighted the elephant in the room, which was the final recommendation in the report is potentially undeliverable at this financial time for Police Scotland. So we've got work to go and do. The next stage for that is Mr. Williams. He's currently on leave, but when he's back, he's going to speak to colleagues across the exec to see how we take this forward. In terms of the first project that was spoken about, there's some resourcing challenge there. And again, against competing demands and priorities within Police Scotland, and a change in focus upon technological solutions. We have to look at that, and I know that's what Mr. Williams is going to do. But we've got a clear plan to take it forward as an EERP and RDU function with the support of the wider organisation. And again, thank Gary for his help with this.
Thank you, Alan. One of the worries we have when we see a report that has two very high-risk actions is just how quickly and how well we can respond to that, and obviously that's what we would like to see more detail of. So it's helpful to know that that's a focus for you at the moment. And of course, the fact that there are these findings has resulted in ASETs highlighting this report in their annual internal audit opinion. So that will be a focus for the authority as well as for yourselves. So I'm not sure if any members of the committee want to come in at this point with any questions. Yes, Paul.
Yes,
please.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thanks, Gary and Alan, for your introduction to this, because it certainly coloured in some of the gaps in my knowledge of this area. I sit in the People Committee as well, and we kind of track the re-rostered rest days and the time off in lieu. And they've gone up to very high levels in the past. They're creeping down at the moment. Would it be fair to say that the inefficiency here, not anybody's fault, has contributed to that, or is that unfair?
I don't think it's as straightforward as that, to be honest.
Right.
But I'll ask Stevie to come in here, who is more steeped in the day-to-day of that than myself. Hi, Stevie.
Thanks, boss. Paul, no, to be honest, it's the opposite way around, that we do our best to keep those numbers down, to keep the re-rostered rest days down. So we look at every available resource. To be honest, this morning we had a meeting with the local policing divisions around that because of the volume of operations and events that are coming on just now. But we will look at every available on-duty resource before we move to cancellation of rest day. The issue that we're seeing at the moment is the volume of additional requirements that we have for operations and events and the frequency that they're happening. But that's the whole point of our department, is to manage that to the best of our best efficiency that we can.
Yeah, but if the report is saying you're not managing it as efficiently for structural reasons, surely that must have an impact.
It probably does in the numbers that we have as well, and again, it's the ability for us to be able to do things within the regulatory timescales, and because these events are coming in much quicker, much more frequently, we have to take them one at a time effectively, where normally we would plan ahead. So that there is an element of inefficiency in that as well, but I would primarily say it's the main cause.
Okay, thanks for that. That's me, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Katrina, you wanted to come in.
Yes, it's maybe, thank you. It's maybe, well, like Paul, actually, I really appreciated this, and it's kind of informed me about some things that have been really, really helpful. I guess maybe you can't answer this, but I'm just concerned about timescales, because you are talking about, you have plans to do X, Y, and Z, but I would be interested to know if you've got a kind of outlined time frame for this. You've given, there was a date there for October 23 for 8 actions, but a target date has not been set for one of the very high risk actions. So that's my question, really.
So I can come back in terms of that, the other high risk action, the target date is the end of 2023 for us to deliver that. What we're really keen not to be in is in a perpetual cycle of being an initial business case. But that's where Mr. Williams will need to have further conversations with colleagues around the exec table to make sure that we've got the resource that allows us to push this on at the pace that it needs to be done.
So thank you, how confident are you that you will get that resource?
Well, that's the $60,000 crown question, isn't it? Or whatever the $1 million crown question. There's a lot of competing demands in Police Scotland, as everybody's well aware on this call at this moment in time. I think the ASET's report, in addition to the initial business case as to where it is, brings some weight to the need to bring change in this area. And I think that Mr. Williams is keen to take that forward through the appropriate structures, but he's not had that yet. So I couldn't give you anything more confirmatory than that at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Gary, you wanted to come back in?
Just very quickly, Chair. I mean, partly just to echo what Alan said about what you have here is a team of great dedicated people actually propping up a system that doesn't work. So they are working to such a high standard themselves in a dedicated way, and they do a brilliant job, but they're not helped by the processes and systems that they're working in. And the audit team's thinking when we were looking at this area was, if this is one area where if you got it working more efficiently and more effectively, actually you would achieve two really strategic outcomes. One is you would have policing where you need it at the right time in the right place, and you would know that because the systems were more improved and they would tell you that. You would have a greater availability of police officers because you would be able to manage that whole workforce planning issue better, and you would more than likely achieve savings to pay for the investment. Because if you could reduce overtime and by managing rest days and managing other things, that in itself could be a significant number. And I think part of the business case to maybe to help Alan and his team is it's not all about the cost. It's as much about those benefits that you can articulate. And it would be really, my personal view is it would be so worth investing in, because it would make a huge difference to police officers' lives, to the lives of the RDU, and it would create better outcomes for policing more generally, or certainly has the capability to do that.
I think that's very persuasive, Gary. I think ACC Williams will probably end up quoting you when he goes to the executive about this. But having highlighted the benefit of an audit of this area of work, and we can now see what the benefits are. We've got a very good report to be able to base the next stages on. But actually, never has it been more important for us to have an effective resource deployment unit and the effective resource deployment of officers. So we're all putting our weight behind this. Hopefully we can see it improve. But like everything else, it's a matter of prioritisation and difficult choices. Before we move on to the next item, has anybody got any further comments or questions on this? If not, thank you very much, and thank you, Alan and Stevie, for your contribution as well. And please ensure that your team know that their work is clearly very much appreciated. Back to you then, Gary. Thank you. Back to you then, Gary, for the third of the internal audit reports, which is on forensic services physical data management.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Paul Kelly is going to introduce this. Paul did the work in the report, so I'm hoping Paul's on the call. I can't see him.
To double check. Yeah. Yes, he's here. Hello, Paul.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Chair. Maybe just as some background and introduction to this report. So this review was included in the plan this last year, largely in response to a data security incident that manifested in late 2021, and which we reported on to the March 22 ARAC meeting. And it was really to look at the extent to which there was adequate controls around about the management of physical case files, looking at aspects such as physical security, operational practices, and the ability to track and trace files when they're transferred between different locations, as well as how they're retained, because physical case files are still in existence in high volumes across each of the forensic services sites. So, and you'll see from the report, I'll just talk briefly, mostly to the executive summary. There's 6 control objectives reviewed. 5 have got amber control ratings and 1 yellow. But maybe just touching on the conclusion in the executive summary. So our review identified that the systems, processes and data aren't quite in place to allow forensic services at a point in time to identify where case files are held at that point in time. So some of the issues around that contribute to the lack of clarity. So there's no single system or data source that provides what we would consider to be an inventory of case files across forensic services as a whole. And that meant we were unable to perform any testing of the existence of case files in a particular location during our work due to that absence of a data source. And data tracking and tracing movements were difficult because there's the data that supports that's dispersed across the evidence management system as well as local team-specific spreadsheets as well. And that in itself contributes to some of the issues that forensic services experience when the case file is reported as missing. It's the traceability of files is difficult. And that's not to say they're not being investigated, but it adds to the time to investigate and then to close. And we saw one example during a review that an investigation that started in August 2022 was still open. So those are all key factors. And the final part, we found that one of the things that's supposed to happen is an annual weeding and disposal of physical case files in conjunction with Police Scotland. We found that that hadn't been undertaken since 2019, and there's an action there for forensic services along with Police Scotland to take that forward and re-establish that process. I'll pause at that point and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. Craig, you want to come in at this stage before I open it up to members?
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. Forensic Services operates a very robust management system in support of our accreditation, and internal audit is always a part of everything that we do. So we do welcome the support and the input that assets contributed to Forensic Services. Certainly there was a number of factors that some that we were aware of, some that we had plans to address, which we'd identified through our own internal audit process, and it certainly provides support to take those actions forward. Whilst we are beholden to paper records and case files, then it's always going to be a difficult task. Context is always the key. I think we have around 42,000 case files, not all of which are actual physical case files. Some may be electronic, depending on how departments work. But as assets and the team have actually identified, making sure that that reconciliation is performed is difficult. There are larger pieces of work regarding RFID tracking of case files and the core operating system, which Forensic Services uses to monitor our case management and case output, and that's part and parcel of the bigger Forensic Services strategy. So all of the things will be tied together. There's some of the actions will be progressed as per the timescales. Others have got longer lead-in times, and that dependent on other work. But we will put the necessary measures in place to make sure that we have that robustness.
Thank you very much, Craig. Any members got any questions? Katrina.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I did note the ARFID piece. I guess my question's really, where are you with that? Is that progressing well?
I can speak to that. We have put in for a CapEx bid to take that forward. It's my colleague Alan Connell, who's on annual leave just now. He is following on in that project, pulling together specifications and things and what would actually be required to take that forward to ensure that we've got a robust system in place.
Okay, thank you. So have you? I think I'm going to keep repeating myself during this meeting. So have you got a time frame for this at all?
I believe it's been progressed through the I forget the words. The mechanisms in place. I think the funding is there. I think they're just working on the specification to ensure that it's fit for purpose for the what we're looking for. Timescales wise, I would need to confirm and come back to you on that one. I don't have that at hand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul?
Yeah, a couple of things. Firstly, can I ask, the weeding and disposal of case files, why wasn't that being undertaken after 2019?
Okay, the weeding case files is done in collaboration with Police Scotland, and I think that there was changes in policy which we were waiting on Police Scotland to come back to us, and rather than taking a proactive approach and actually taking that work forward and on and collaborating together, it wasn't quite picked up. There is now a process in place that has been agreed in January of this year, and there is a plan been put in place to make sure that that is effectively taken forward in collaboration with Police Scotland. So that's all in place now, and I believe the weeding is starting up, and a plan in place to look after the backlog that has been in place since that time.
That's grand. Second question I've got is regarding the recommendations that aren't being accepted. There's one not accepted and one partially accepted. And I'm never entirely comfortable when someone is audited and they say I'm not accepting that. So can I get some assurance from somebody that this is reasonable not accepting that? Because I do understand there's sometimes a bit of back and forth between auditors and those that are being audited about the viability or achievability of something, but as a board member, a member of this committee, it would be quite good to know that assets aren't just being brushed off here.
I can certainly give you assurance, Paul. The one that was partially accepted, whilst we recognise that it is important to have standard operating procedures in place, sometimes due to geography, buildings, that sort of thing, it's not possible to have a single consistent process. So there is variation between different sites, different scales, different laboratories, and different areas of forensic services. We can't have one policy to fit all. What we will have is separate procedures that meet the requirements and the standard and security arrangements that are required for access control within each of the sites. So that was why it was partially accepted, as variation in different sites. Regarding the one that was not accepted, it comes down to resource and the ability to do that full reconciliation of 42,000 case files. We are putting effective plans in place to move forward to make sure that the processes are holistically fit for purpose. I think out of 42,000 cases, if my numbers are here right, there was only 10 that we couldn't put our finger on that we launched an investigation into. These are raised in the management system as information security events. They are treated as critical non-conformities at the highest level of management, and there are robust procedures in place to ensure that the investigation is carried out and searches are conducted of all relevant areas. As Paul quite rightly raised, sometimes that takes a little bit of time because the system is in place, and it's a little bit onerous on staff because we get different staff to check different areas so that we've got more than one opinion and looking in that area. Of those 10 at the time of the audit, there was only 3 that were unaccounted for, and I can confirm that all of them have since been found, and it's always in the last place you look, I'm afraid, but they have been found and traced. It just does take time. The Director of Forensic Services, taking that into context, felt that with 42,000 files, it would be disproportionate and unhelpful to balance the work that would be involved to do that against the loss of or the misplacement of the case files and the work it is required to actually find them.
Okay,
Does that answer your
for that.
question, Paul?
Yeah, and can I ask, are there any risks attached to not accepting that recommendation? I hear your rationale, but are there any risks that we need to have flagged up to us by not going down the route that assets were advocating?
I don't believe so. I think we have robust policies in place. We actually have our own internal audit system, which is also looking at this area and identifying corrective and preventive action. So it's a continual exercise. It's not just a line in the sand. So we will continue to monitor this to make sure that there's improvements identified throughout the system as we move forward.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Gary has his hand up anyway, so maybe able to address that point.
Well, just very quickly, I think the key thing is that going forward, one of the key issues in this report is the ability of forensic services to know where every case file is at any point in time. So you come along and say, where is this case file? And they are able to track and trace. And irrespective of what's happened before with, us not being able to locate 10 or what you want assurance about going forward is that at any point in time, the service will be able to track and trace those things. And obviously that's critical for the justice system, to enable the justice system to work properly, but also you don't want to have a miscarriage of justice or, at the most extreme level, and accept this is an extreme level issue, if you weren't able to locate that case file and the evidence, that could potentially carry reputational risks and other risks. So rather than dwell on what's happened in the past, I think the report clearly tells you what the position is. I would be focusing on what's going to happen going forward, and then that's helpful, I think, in terms of the resource issue that Craig is mentioning.
Well, that's really helpful, Gary. Thanks. But I did feel that I needed to ask the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary. Craig, you wanted to come back in?
Yes, please, if I may. The risk of that extreme event happening is extremely low. We have most, if not all, of the information on our evidence management system. So should it be required, we can recreate everything that we would have on the case, and it's not something that would be expected in the process. We can recreate things and we can produce things as required should that be needed for court.
Okay, and Paul, you also wanted to come back in?
Yeah, Jerry, very quickly, Chair. Maybe just draw attention as well to when we look in the report, one of the things Forensic Services has committed to do is actually perform spot checks as well, which goes some way to managing that risk overall.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing is that there are some alternatives being looked at, and for example, the radio frequency identification, the spot checks, these things could mitigate some of the risks, but ASIC's position is clearly that the preference would be to proceed with recommendation 1.1b. The alternative view is that that wouldn't represent best value in the current demanding environment within forensics. So I think we have your report, Gary, very, very valuable. You can hear already that forensics have made good use of it and are using it to, consider the response and improve how we go forward. And I think that should be the focus that we have. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, everybody, for your contributions and questions. Thank you. That brings us to the end of item 2.1. Those were three really good internal audit reports, and I think Police Scotland and Forensics have made good use of these reports already. So thank you for those, Gary. Moving on to item 2.2 is the annual internal audit report, and we're back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Chair. And this is the summary report which provides you with the internal audit opinion on governance and control systems, which is built around all of the work that we do throughout the year. It informs your annual governance statement within the annual accounts, which will be audited obviously by your external auditor. So it's a key part of your overall governance process during the year. And what we're saying in this report is that we're able to provide an opinion, and it's a reasonable opinion. An internal audit are not able to go beyond reasonable because we can't test every system everywhere and test everything. So we provide a reasonable opinion on the adequacy of the systems of governance, performance and control, and we say that those are operating well. And then we have an except for opinion where we've identified red risks during the year, and you've just heard one there about the desk system, and then the other one was around the control of PAVA sprays and tasers, and those are the exceptions. The report goes on to provide information in detail around the work that we've done and around how we've done that work. It tells you that Police Scotland have good arrangements for implementing and tracking the implementation of agreed audit actions, and actually they do well in that area. There's still quite a lot of actions that are outstanding, but they have good arrangements, and that should give you assurance around how important management take internal audit recommendations. We also identify some key themes, and I think it's probably worth stepping back a little bit from all of the work that we've done and looking at some of those kind of key themes. And one of them you would expect to happen is that the organisation is starting to struggle for resource. And when we, particularly this year, it's noticeable that when we're looking at some of those control mechanisms, they're often people that are the control. It's people in middle management that are exercising the controls and the checking and the validating and providing assurance. So if you look at vetting, or we just look, for example, at the review for the RDU unit, and we've just looked as well in the desk system. And I think it is worth looking at that in the round and recognizing that as control systems, as capacity goes down a little bit, some of the risks go up. And that might become a feature going forward for the audit committee to continue looking at. Just to end then, so we also confirmed to you that we have delivered the full audit plan, so all of the reports are available to you. We also confirmed that we are independent, that we've complied with public sector internal audit standards, and we provide information on the quality of our work and the independent assessment of that quality. And really just for me to end, we have been with you for 9 years as your internal auditors, and I can genuinely say it's been a genuine privilege. It's a terrific organisation to work with, and all of the team have really enjoyed that, and we wish you every success going forward. And also to recognise maybe the journey that Police Scotland, the SPA and Forensics have been through, and it's a remarkably improved organisation from governance and control and performance perspective than it was when we started. And that's a real testament, I think, to the people in the room and the call for all of the hard work in reaching that stage. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Those words are very, very much appreciated. As is all the work that you've done with us over the last 9 years. You obviously know a lot more about us than probably many of us do, but it's been our pleasure to work with you as well. I don't know if either Lynn or John want to say something in response to your comments at this stage.
If I may, Chair, first of all, and
Yes.
then pass on. So thank you, Gary, and thank you. I mean, 9 years you've been here really since the Police Scotland SPN Forensics has been set up, and your comments are really welcomed. We are very much committed to improving and continuous improvement moving forward. The work that you've done for the authority in the 9 years that you've been our internal auditor has been absolutely crucial in that journey. We have responded, I hope you would say, always positively to some hard reports. And I think what's really important is that you'll have seen that Police Scotland and ourselves would come to you when there was an area that we were concerned about. And I think that's about internal audit. It's not there to look where things are going well. It's there to look where things need improved. And you have done that, and your team have really helped us in that journey. So thank you very much. This is a really good report. I know there's some areas that are going into the annual report in terms of we need to pay more attention to, and you've pulled those out, and we will do that. But I actually think the role of internal audit is crucial to the improvements that we've made. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Anybody else wish to come in at this stage? In which case, thank you for this report. We note that what you've seen gives reasonable assurance, except in relation to the 2 issues that we've already highlighted today. The report will be useful to us as we go forward. And it only remains for me, on behalf of the committee, to say thank you very much to ASETS for their input. It's been a bit of a roller coaster at times over the last 9 years, but we have very much appreciated your support and your challenge as well. So thank you, Gary, and thank you, please, to all of your colleagues who've been involved in those audits. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Paul and I were planning to drop off the call at this point, and
That would be fine.
Yeah, okay.
That'd be fine. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We're moving on now to the external audit progress update, and we have Rebecca. Do we?
Yes,
No.
thank
Oh,
you.
yes, Rebecca. Sorry, I couldn't see you there, but hello. Hi, Rebecca
all right.
Lister from BDO.
Grant Thornton, thank
Oh,
you.
from
Chair.
Grant Thornton. Sorry. Bleh.
That's all right. It's nice to meet everyone on the call that I haven't yet had the opportunity to meet. So this is our progress and sector update report. So I'll take the report as read, and we'll just pull out the key items within the report. So if I address members' attention to page 5 of the report. This outlines the key deliverables for us for the financial year. So we issued our annual audit plan in March. We've undertaken planning and interim work, and our findings are contained within this report. And we currently are on track to deliver our annual audit report and our audit opinion by the end of September, which will be reported back to committee members at the September meeting. If I draw your attention to pages 7 to 9 of the report, so this outlines our interim findings from our early testing. So we undertook our planning and early testing work in March and April. The planning work was completed to inform our annual audit plan. And as year end is an incredibly busy time for both the finance team and the audit team, we undertook early testing in order to front load some of the audit work to bring that forward in the process and relieve some of that pressure at year end. So just pulling out some of the findings in this report. So on page 8, you'll find that there was an amber finding against the IT general controls. So we undertake an IT general controls audit on material systems that feed into the annual accounts, such as payroll and HR, the finance ledger, and the fixed asset system. So we've utilised our internal IT experts to undertake this work. And no issues were identified in relation to the payroll and HR systems or the general ledger system. However, we did identify one deficiency that was noted in relation to the fixed asset system, and that's essentially where there were a high number of users identified with access to that system, which can present the risk that there is inappropriate access or changes that could be made to underlying data. We have received management comments subsequent to the finalisation of this report, and management have noted our comments highlighting that the access is granted to the SQL server, and the Police Scotland team oversee SQL servers, so they have escalated that to them with a view to understanding and resolving the issue. To provide some assurance to members as part of our year-end audit, we will be testing the outputs of that system that feed into the accounts to ensure that the outputs of that system are not materially misstated. So we are undertaking that work as part of the year-end audit. On page 9 of the report, you'll see that we also undertook testing on the opening balances of property, plant and equipment. Given the wide-ranging asset base that the authority has, there has been some delay in receiving all of the audit evidence in relation to this area, but management have confirmed that we will receive the residual evidence for this for us starting our year-end audit. As part of that testing, we have identified that one of the IT assets disposed of in the prior year hadn't been derecognised from the fixed asset system. So this doesn't have an impact on the net book value because the net book value is nil. However, there is a risk that the gross value of assets could be overstated. So we are working with management to gain assurance as to whether this is an isolated issue or a more pervasive issue. So currently this is an interim finding, which we will report back on with our final conclusions once that work has been concluded within the annual audit report. So overall, from our view, there aren't any significant issues coming out of the work performed so far, and there's no changes to the risks identified at planning. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the finance team at both the SPA and Police Scotland for their cooperation. It is quite difficult in a first-year audit with all the audit requests, so it's just to thank them for their responsiveness and cooperation in the audit process so far. Page 11 onwards just provides a sector update of the various reports and publications relevant to the sector for members' information. But otherwise, I will pause there and happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That's very helpful. If I could say, I found your tracker, the 3 pages there, very useful. Good way of presenting the information to us. So thank you for that. John, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to add to the update on timelines and progress, to say that this week on Monday, we completed our first full draft of the annual report and accounts, which was submitted to Rebecca and the rest of the team now. So that's on time and a full set of accounts, including the governance statement. So we're on track for the year to date, just to get involved with the audit now.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't expect anything less, but it's still very reassuring to know that we're on track this year again. So thank you for that, John. Does anybody have any questions? No. Okay, thank you very much. That's nice to meet you, Rebecca, and thank you for your report. Moving on to item 3 now, audit and improvement progress. Item 3.1 is an internal audit update, and that's, I think, John, you presenting that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Obviously, Azets are the first part of this, which is just the standard report on progress. As we've seen, they've completed their full plan for the year, and you've seen their annual opinion on that. So nothing particularly to dwell on that point. Like I say, it's been a pleasure to work with them over the years. Probably what I would turn your attention to is the last appendix, which provides the progress report from our new internal auditors, BDO, and we're joined today by Claire Robertson, who'll be able to talk to you through some highlights from her report.
Okay, thank you, John. Claire, lovely to meet you. You wish to take us through any part of this report?
We're at the very early stages of
Yes.
our kind of contract implementation, so there are no audit results yet to report within there, but you will see that it contains confirmation that the plan is on track and there's timescales set out and expected reporting dates for each review in the plan. So hopefully that's of a useful piece of information for you.
Yes, thank you. And again, the presentation of that is useful. Thank you. Any comments or questions from members? No. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Claire, and thanks, John. So moving on to item 3.2, the internal audit charter. And I think we're back to you, Claire, for this one.
That's right. So this is an important document for us in that it sets out and describes our position within the organisation as the independent internal auditors, contains information about our relationship with the committee and with senior management, and outlines the scope and purpose of our work. We've also included within this report some suggested KPIs, and it's our intention to monitor ourselves against these KPIs and report that to you at each meeting. So any kind of feedback or thoughts or comments on those would be most welcome.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Thank you very much then, that's helpful. I think, yeah, we'll obviously look forward to receiving reports, but in accordance with this, so thank you very much. We're beginning to make up a wee bit of time, so we've got still a fair number of items to go through, and I think we'll potentially spend quite a lot of time on some of the items later on in the agenda. But if we can move now to item 3.3, which is the Police Scotland Audit and Improvement Recommendation Tracker for Q4. And we have with us ACC Alan Spears. So Alan, happy to hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good afternoon, folks. Donna Adams, our audit manager, is with us, and we'll maybe share a screen just getting a little bit of detail from the report, but just a couple of general observations, Chair, for myself. We currently have 187 recommendations open, and it's probably quite a considerable time since I've highlighted a volume of recommendations as high as that, and 54 recommendations added from the last period. What I would suggest that is reflective of the level of scrutiny and audit that exists within our organisation, and we're pleased to try and work our way through those recommendations. So of all of those open recommendations, almost 3/4 of them have been made within the last 12 months. And there are a proportion that Donna will highlight from the report where there are delays, and again, just from my perspective, to give the committee reassurance that through our own audit and risk board within Police Scotland, we are applying a high level of scrutiny and assurance around those recommendations which are delayed. And really the final observation for me is that there are a percentage, just under 40% of those recommendations, which are categorised as better practice, and that is about improving activities rather than non-compliance or significant change. So again, that's a positive picture as we try and enhance our processes and procedures. So from me, I would like to, if you're okay, hand over to Donna, just let her go in a little bit deeper into the report, make some additional observations as audit manager, and we'll be happy to take your questions from there.
Absolutely, that would be fine. Donna, over to you.
Would you like me to share the screen, or are you happy that I just go through the report? Because I realise you're probably short of time.
No, we're okay for time. If you've got
Okay.
something that would be useful, yep, feel free to share that, Donna.
Okay, just 2 minutes then.
I was getting a wee bit nervous about time, but I think we've made up some time in the last couple of items.
Okay, Teams is not playing so good today, so I'm hoping that you're able to see that on the screen. I'll just make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it. It's going very slowly today, so just bear with me.
Okay, I can see that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what the report shows, it's our quarterly update in relation to all the activity and recommendations from external audit and inspections that we receive in Police Scotland. So this is a slightly updated quarterly report from Q4 because it also covers up to the end of April. Within the report, as Mr. Spears has said, there's 187 recommendations open, which is quite a significant number. We usually have between 130 and 150 recommendations. We've had 54 open in the last quarter that have been newly added, and we've had 30 closures. There's some information in terms of the closures provided on this slide, and it really just gives you some high-level detail of what has been achieved over the last quarter, because we focus quite a lot on what we maybe didn't achieve. We're not so good at focusing on actually all the improvements that we have made. There's some further information in terms of the risk breakdown. So you can see that 16% of our recommendations have a very high or a high risk status, and that's provided there. So it's relatively quite low in comparison to the total number of recommendations that we have open. And I think that reflects the type of recommendations, where we've got a large proportion of recommendations that are continuous improvement activity rather than a focus on a non-compliance. That's probably indicates that. We've got 3 recommendations which are classed as very high risk, and they relate to the compliance internal audit regarding PAVA and Airwave. And because you remember discussions at the last meeting we had, you expressed some concern about the lengthy timescales that were associated with that, and it's just to provide some assurance that we monitor these recommendations on a monthly basis. We have a number of milestones that we're looking to achieve before that final end date, and within this slide here, we're providing an update on only those with the very high risk status. So there's been significant progress that we've made in terms of putting in some temporary oversight arrangements. We've got ownership allocated. We've got a group established that's overseeing a much more detailed action plan. We've been able to bring forward some dates where we're confident we'll be able to have revised processes and procedures in place. We've already started tracking stock. We've got a good understanding of the stock that's been issued, and we're making headway in terms of matching up that stock at its different locations. And as part of this, we'll have a really effective compliance monitoring system that's built in to the issue of the stock, so we'll have much better control over that. The report also provides some details on those recommendations that have not been met in the quarter, and we provide some assurances why those haven't been met. They've all been through our management board structure, and we interrogate those that haven't been met to make sure that, one, we are making progress. If we haven't made as much progress, we're replanning activities, because things do change between the recommendations being made and the discharge of them. So we provide some further detail in relation to those, and we also provide some detail in terms of those that we're considering to be pending or on hold, and that just simply means that we have taken all the action that we intended to, but for one reason or another we're holding it open because we haven't been able to demonstrate how effectively that change has taken place. So that is in relation to pending, and we provide all of the details in relation to the delays on these 2 slides, and I'm happy to take any questions in relation to any of those, but I think you'll find there's a good explanation and detailed reason why those have been delayed, along with revised timescales where we know them. The final slide is really just in relation to the trends, and that's where Mr. Spears mentioned that the highest proportion of the recommendations that we've got open were made in the last financial year, and that is probably what you would expect to see. And those that are outstanding from the other years are in the minority, and it's because they're harder, more complex to address. And that's all I'd like to say. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Donna. That was very clear, and your slides were helpful. Does anybody have any questions for either Alan or Donna? I think it's always helpful if you can close as many as get opened in any particular reporting period. But you're not quite there, but you got 30 closed in the period as well, so that's helpful. I think obviously the concentration of effort has to be on those which are either very high risk or high risk, and you've explained what's happening with those, or where there is a delay which appears difficult to understand. So thank you for the extra information that you've provided. Anybody got any final comments or questions? Nope. In which case, thank you very much, ACC Spears, and thank you to Donna as well. So we're moving on to item 3.4, which is the same report but from the SPA this time, and that would be John.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. It's quite straightforward. The one thing that I would quite like to highlight, and particularly thank Donna, who's just been on, for helping the SPA and the rest of the team in moving towards the 4 action system. So we're looking now to automate part of our recommendations tracking onto some of the same system that Police Scotland have been using, which is to make things a bit more efficient for ourselves. So that'll be great to see going forward. And again, really thankful for all the help from Police Scotland in doing that. Otherwise, I'll take the report as read and happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's good to have an example of joint working on something, but I understand that a lot of the recommendations that you're both seeking to address will be jointly owned as well. So I think it's important that we keep up that positive communication and joint working on these things. Thank you very much. Anybody got any comments? Sorry, John.
I was just going to add, Chair, to that point, you're exactly right. I think there's opportunities, particularly in HMICS reviews, when there are a number of joint recommendations for the SPA and Police Scotland to address. If we were using the same system or recording mechanism, there'd be a great way to communicate better with HMICS on those findings and what we're doing.
Yeah, well, hopefully that works out then. That would be good. Anybody got any final comments or questions on item 3.4? If not, we're moving on to the section of the...
I've got my hand up.
Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. It's just I see there's long...
Paul, I don't know if you can tell, but you're frozen on our screens.
Chair, we'll maybe just pause for a couple of minutes to
allow
Paul to come back in.
Yeah.
Chair, I do suspect I know what Paul was about to ask there. He started by saying long-standing recommendations. So he's probably going to refer to there are 3 long-standing recommendations related to ICO. We can pick this up after, but I mean, for the benefit of just now,
okay.
Those are 3 recommendations which we've had for a long time. They're effectively joint recommendations with Police Scotland related to our software and our hardware, and there's Paul back now.
Okay, hello, Paul. You froze there. Oh, now you're on mute.
It never rains, but it pours.
No, indeed. Nice to have you back.
Sorry about that.
No, John thought he understood what your question was going to be, but maybe you'll tell him differently.
Right, did I get kicked out before I posed the question?
You did. You just started to say something.
It was
about...
very eloquently delivered. Where am I? Let me just see.
You were saying it was something to do with long-standing recommendations.
Yeah, the 2008 ICO SPA audit, and where are we with the response to that?
John did guess correctly then, so he'll be able to give you an answer to that, Paul.
Yes, Paul. As I was saying, these are 3 joint recommendations with Police Scotland, which relate to our software and our hardware asset registers. They've been going on for a long time. Effectively, that's a service that's provided from Police Scotland, and we've been working with the team as part of a much broader project, actually, to try and get those asset registers up to scratch, to discharge some of this recommendation. So it's been work that's ongoing. It's very much dependent on a much bigger project, actually, within Police Scotland. That's where we are. It's an ongoing project and needs a bit more effort, really, from Police Scotland's side. We are working closely with them.
When you say a bit more effort, what does that mean?
There's a lot of priorities, and it's quite complex in terms of we're looking at an asset and software register for all systems. So we're quite a small element of that one project, but we need to fold in with the larger Police Scotland plans in there. And the project has been ongoing for a while, but this is much tied up with DDICT, a target operating model for digital division. So we're just one tiny element of a much bigger project, really. And we need to fold into that when they're ready.
Okay, and we'll have any idea when they will be ready? Because this is now 5 years down the line.
It is. We'll need to take that up again with Andrew Hendry and then the rest of the IT team who will be working on that. We can come back to you with an answer.
Yeah, appreciate
that. Andrew's able to chip in just now, but happy to come back as an action.
You happy with that, Paul?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Andrew has his hand up anyway, so.
No, thanks, Chair. Nice to support John and you know and address Paul. I think let's take it as an action. As Paul outlines, timelines have moved on somewhat, and I think we can probably give it a bit more focus. So I'm more happy to discuss that off table.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else then on that item 3.4? If not, we have a very substantial item next on our agenda, which is the Police Scotland Change Portfolio update. And Andrew, that's your report. So if you want to lead us through that, that would be helpful. Not all 126 pages, but the highlights perhaps.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. I'd be glad to know I wasn't planning on reading through the pack. The pack's there for information as has been requested. Just as a reminder to colleagues on the board and members, ARAC had requested that Police Scotland provide a high-level overview of change. It was requested that this wasn't an additional product, and actually was based on the change board products, hence why they're included as part of the appendix. This was to support the oversight of change from SPA, and we've had a number of presentations at ARAC on that basis. I'm aware SPA offers a 10 change board and also feature in a range of programmes and project boards, etc. So again, I won't spend too much time going through the whole report. In regards to portfolio annual review, so just to reassure members, as we have done every year, this year's portfolio was put through a review. What I would say though, unlike previous years, we are now in a very mature state in regards to the complexity levels of the change transformation that's actually taking place. Much of it is design based, so much of it is about actually as is and to be analysis, which then leads to transformation in its own right, being designed through business cases, etc. I would compare this to maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where it was much more focused on capability creation, whereby we're buying in technology and or capability to kind of put in place a relatively speaking bare minimum level of operating infrastructure to allow the organisation to operate nationally. And I would surface mobile as an example of that, whereby previously the mobile programme was focused on acquiring the devices and putting in place the capability. We're now focused on making better use of it. And that actually, draws out into much more design-led conversations, and dependencies and synergies become much more obvious in that space. As I said, this year's portfolio review was more straightforward than most, on the basis that we've got multi-year programmes running, and the bulk of our capacity was being used by those programmes. So, in regards to prioritisation and review of the portfolio for this financial year, it was predominantly based on the existing portfolio. and all programmes of work were still supported and required. So on that basis, we look to progress. We did do some consolidation, and we did do some review of activities that were highly dependent on each other, and that allowed us to find some synergies and subsequently some efficiencies between projects. We also undertook a review of resourcing to make sure that we made sure that all our programmes were resourced up to a level of being deliverable. One of the changes we also made off the back of that was to set a bare minimum level of around 80% of resourcing before programmes are allowed to commence. Previously, not necessarily deliberately, but at times programmes were commencing without the full resource in place, which led to delays should other resources not become available. So again, this is other changes we've made to make sure that we're starting programmes on the best foot. More generally, I would just say the portfolio is made up of a range of activity, which I would describe loosely as being design or capability focused. All of which is built upon links to strategy and outcomes of the organisation, and that then goes on to meet either or both of our demands which are put on the organisation, or equally our own ambition to transform. The balance here is obviously key to strike between meeting demands and obviously delivering against our ambition. It's particularly given that much of our transformation ambition would allow us to change how we meet demand, and in some cases get ahead of it. As the organisation has matured, as has the portfolio, which I touched on at the start, we've now got a range of activity that ranges from that redesign to implementation of new technology and capability, right away through to ways of working, etc., which all impact on culture, day-to-day life, and services delivered. We are recognising that we are at a point now of needing to better demonstrate that strategy, transformation, and organisational impact that probably is more evident given the nature of the programme, and that's something that is being worked on with the team just now. I would loosely describe that in the kind of business planning type space, and about how we produce a product that brings all that together, which will allow the story to be told, and also better conversations to be had around progress. Benefits realisation, simply put, goes beyond benefits delivered now. Our first step around that was to move purely from single benefit measurement into broader benefit categories, which can be seen in the pack, around strategic delivery, capability improvement, etc., and also alongside efficiency. But also start to move those conversations around prioritisation into a similar space. So again, all that work's underway, and we are confident to be in a place ahead of the next financial year to be able to discuss and demonstrate this approach, which I think will benefit both committees but also the organisation as a whole in regards to getting behind that transformation journey. Other components to draw out, Chair, would be around the strategic efficiency redesign and reinvestment, which is on page 3 of the report. I think it's page 259 of the overall pack. This is our move into using priority-based budgeting combined with transformation and organisational design to allow the organisation to bring together for the first time people, transformation and service review into the one space. Again, a much more mature approach, a natural evolution for the organisation. This was piloted in the Octi space roughly 12 months ago, and this led to a number of efficiencies being identified alongside service improvement, which is a very difficult mix to normally get to, which seen the business area being given the space and the support to consider redesign of its services. This is done on a 3-phase model where initially demand is analysed, service levels are defined, and then organisationally decisions are made around those service levels. And they can be from resource modelling right the way through to the actual services being delivered. And obviously with the organisation's current challenges around funding, etc., being in place, that's a key challenge for us. SARR provides us with that mechanism to do that. It goes beyond pure finance and actually goes into, as I said, that kind of triangle of transformation, finance, and kind of organisational and service design. That Octi pilot was successful. It created an implementation plan, which is now being worked through within the organisation. There's agreement kind of in the last couple of weeks to start to broaden that out, and a business case is being produced around that, which will come to governance in due course. but that will see us having a defined methodology that brings together these areas, which is going to have an positive impact onto our transformation portfolio, and actually will add to what I outlined previously about producing products in this space that bring together tighter links between the strategy, transformation, and overall service delivery. So again, more of an update here today, but a number of colleagues at SP have had discussions already, and as I said, products appearing through governance shortly around this to make sure we've got input and oversight of that. Over and above that, Chair, I was going to maybe just hand back to yourself, if that's okay, and take discussion. I'll take the papers as read. As I said, they are all the standard packs from the Change Board, which I know SP are very well cited on, and I'm conscious this session's about supporting the oversight rather than me taking you through it. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, you've reminded me of a conversation we did have in committee a few months ago, Andrew, about not having to do two slightly different reports, one for your Change Board and one for this committee. So what we maybe need to do is have a way of ensuring that the covering report that you provide for this, along with the report that normally goes to the Change Board, directs us to what the key areas are, so that we can get the key assurances that we need from that without having to necessarily plough our way through everything there, because there are people from the SPA who are very well informed about what's happening in the Change Board, members less so perhaps. So just to allow us to go directly to the bit that we might be interested in. So that would be helpful, but thank you for that, and thank you for reminding me of that discussion that we had. We certainly don't want you having to spend valuable time preparing reports that are just slightly different if we can find our way around the report you're doing already anyway. Katrina, you've got your hand up.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay.
Actually, I was going to say something very similar to what you've just said, Mary. I mean, there's such a wealth of information in here, but I personally find I'm finding it quite hard to 120 pages to get to the key points, really. So there was that. I mean, I appreciate how much work goes into these things. So it's not really a criticism, it's more about my ability to get through 120 pages of report and pull out what are the key issues of something that's quite so detailed. I think I did have a question around, let me check my notes, sorry. There was a question around moving, sorry, let me just check my notes.
Do you want me to come back to you, Katrina? Because Lynn's got her hand up maybe on the point that we were just discussing. That give you a minute or two?
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. And the report is detailed, but there are some key pages I think I maybe want to draw your attention to, maybe Andrew can comment on. It's going back also to a comment that Grant McRae made at the pre-meeting, Chair. He couldn't attend today, but he was saying coming through his resources committee was this issue of transformation on the capital budget. Half of what was expected to be spent was spent, and a lot of the rationale behind that was to do with the resources. So if I may, maybe you could Andrew could look, I think it's page 11, I think, of page 11, which is showing a very helpful, where it shows the previous rating, the current and the forecast, and it goes from red to yellow. I think that's really important, and maybe I think it might be helpful to the committee, if Andrew could just say a wee bit why they're more confident that it's moving from that red to the amber. And then further on, I think it's the next page, page 12, it sets it against each of the change headings. So Andrew, do you want to say a bit about that, how it's, I think as I'm reading it, it's moving from red to amber in terms of overall progress, unless I've misread that.
Thanks, Lynn. Andrew?
Thanks, James, Lynn. Yeah, so I mean, first I'll just draw to attention the kind of covering report, the kind of attached document, seeks to highlight, I suppose, what I think would be key oversight terms. So again, happy to speak to that as well. But again, I took that kind of report as read. In regards to the portfolio moving from amber, from red into amber, overall, our resourcing challenges are starting to lessen. predominantly in the marketplace and also through our own internal processes, etc. It's still a challenge. We have got plans to address some of these through resourcing models, which will allow us to kind of cut down some of the churn, if you like, that comes with organisational change. I think particularly how we resource on a case-by-case basis versus having a pool of resource. I think it's under review just now on the basis that if we can agree a kind of natural capacity for the following years with suitable ring-fenced funding, we'll be able to then cut down some of that churn, and organisationally sticking to that limits would allow us then to remove some of those unknowns. So overall, the move from what was red amber into kind of amber red, amber green is around that shift. Also as well, some of the impacts from things like COP26, Operation Unicorn, etc., have now landed and been dealt with. So again, we're seeing programmes now almost recovering from some of those impacts, and again, seen us move into a much more stable state. There is also as well worth noting that the definitions for green, amber, red, etc., are also under review, particularly for committee level discussions, given that a project plan is exactly that. It's a plan. Things are changing daily. Our job as an organisation is to make sure that what's changing is obviously reviewed and also accepted. But given the nature of this, given the size of the portfolio, sometimes the kind of move from green to amber to red and back to green again isn't really that helpful for the conversations we're all having. So that again is also under review, because as I said, I think our measures in some cases are particularly tight when it comes to the shifts around, which could in some cases just be natural progression of change. But overall, as I said, the portfolio is moving into steadier state again, and particularly when it comes to resourcing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Katrina, did you want to come back in there? Lynn's just put her hand up, which I think you might both be going to ask the same things. Something similar.
Well, I actually was going to ask something very similar around that. So thanks, Lynn. You kind of solved that for me in a way. But I'm going to be really honest here and go. I find it difficult to understand how it could be, say on page. I don't really understand how something can be made amber when a whole lot of the specifics underneath that heading are actually moving from amber to red. If I got that right.
Yeah, I think some of the programmes are still red, aren't they? So yeah, so
right.
How is the overall programme amber? Is that, yeah? Andrew, did you want to deal with that before I bring Lynn back in?
Certainly, Chair. So this comes down to not only the size and scale of the programmes, but also the components within, and also in some cases the cause, if you like, the root cause. In some cases, for example, a supplier being delayed would cause a shift. Once that's been reviewed and accepted, that can then move back. Otherwise, programmes would obviously stay within a particular state forever. Also, as well, those mitigating steps in regards to moving programmes back in, they're also evaluated to make sure that we're being realistic in a positive and in a negative in that sense. So overall portfolio versus individual programme lines allows that shift essentially.
Okay. Katrina, happy with that?
Yeah, no, I thank you. Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lynn and then John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And really, my comments were really sort of echoing what Katrina was touching on, and it's really, I think it's the following page where it sets out the programmes, and you see some that are consistently red. I think the top two around criminal justice services, and then you've got some, I think it's the only ones that are consistently red. So I think for the members, for me, we should be saying to you, this has been very candid. This is where we are. This is where we think we're making progress, and it is in here. I understand that it is here, but this is a vast agenda that you have today. So it's a case of what in this is important. I think Mr. Hendry's pulled that out. He's quite clearly said it's moving from red to amber. These are the areas that we've still got issues on. And so I think it's helpful if we just focus on that. But I was going to go back to what Katrina was saying. It was not that page. But I'll pass over back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. John, you've got your hand up as well.
Chair, it was more on process to Katrina and your own points earlier. Andrew and other colleagues from SPA have been looking at the much wider oversight of change, as well as the business case process that goes to Resources Committee as well as ARAC. And we are looking at some changes to that, which we were going to come back to discuss to you at some point in the future. But that is being discussed, and that might also look at how we could potentially think about what gets presented to ARAC and perhaps how it gets presented, as well as what currently happens at Resources Committee. So that conversation is happening.
Yeah, I think something that allowed us to have clarity around what's going where and whether or not there's duplication or there needs to be a better division of stuff. I don't know, but yeah, that'd be a useful conversation to have offline, I think, John. Yep. Katrina?
I just wanted to add to that clearly, that this is a very, this is an overview of a huge amount of a lot of areas of work, and it's not our job to kind of add to your burden, as Mary earlier said. But in terms of my responsibility on this committee, in terms of that oversight and scrutiny and all the rest of it, I feel very uncomfortable if I can't actually understand the information. So this has been really helpful.
Thank you, Katrina. I mean, I think that's right. I think it's a huge programme, and we're trying to get our head around all the different elements of it. So I think what we need is something that points us in the direction of the key areas we need to be assuring ourselves about. So one of them for me, before I bring you back in, Andrew, is the issue of prioritisation. I think in your presentation you said that all there had been some consolidation of projects, but they'd all basically been looked at and were all being supported, and therefore all had to stay in the programme and be taken forward. And I suppose that reminds me of the old adage about if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So, what guides you in knowing where to devote resources, particularly when resources are tight? And obviously we see from the report that you have some permanent posts that are vacant and have been for a wee while, and some temporary posts that are vacant as well, quite significant numbers. So how do you decide on the allocation of resource and what uses up your bandwidth when there's such a vast programme and resources are tighter?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'll answer your question first and then speak to my general point, which I think also touches on that. So I think the prioritisation piece particularly is one that, again, is moving to a different level now. I would say it's much more about the vehicles of change we've got across some of the categories. So, for example, digital and data, people, operational policing, enabling services. These are now vehicles for, delivery against ambition and demand. I think our prioritisation now is actually within those buckets, if you like, or within those vehicles. How are we better joining those up, making sure we're exposing dependencies and taking advantage of synergies, but also how much of energy, if you like, we put into each of these spaces, and that's kind of what's being worked on now. The prioritisation of the past was really more about doing this and not doing that. I think much of what we've got coming through now fits into these work streams. But it's actually, which from my experience elsewhere and also just in industry generally, that is a sign that we are getting to probably that much more mature state. The issue is, and this is more to my general point, and I touched on this in my introduction, is I think the mechanics in the middle, which actually in the most part is the most complex bit, is actually where it needs to be and operating well, which I would see as the functional piece here. I think the bit before and at the end is where we're now focusing on, which is that why and the organisational drivers, if you like, around this, which we can make sure that what we're working on ultimately delivers against. Now, it already is, but it's not in a way that we can man-mark and I suppose tell a story with, which then feeds to the latter part of that, which is then about benefits and delivery and organisational impact. Again, we're clearly delivering benefits, we're tracking them, but in regards to supporting members on this committee and others and tracking that story, I think those two bits of work that are now being focused on will allow us to do that. I mean, ultimately, for oversight of change, I'd like to come to a committee like this and be able to demonstrate the plan as we outlined and where we're up to on that plan. And then obviously any differences in expectation can be discussed and explained. But as it stands right now, we've got a lot of work ongoing, which all in its own right stands up to scrutiny independently. But in regards to the overarching transformation of the organisation, that almost design type product that draws all that together is currently under review. So again, I'll just say there, I appreciate all the positive comments, but I do recognise that given the nature of the portfolio, it's probably quite hard to kind of pull together into an oversight position, which is what we're working on with colleagues like John and others on at the moment. And as I said, confident in the coming months to be able to present something back, which I think the organisation can hold to account against. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, Andrew. I think that we don't want to get into the detail. Obviously, that's not our job. We're trying to take a strategic oversight position, but there may be one or two projects that we should have more information on. And for example, the whole modernised contact and engagement programme and the interface with the Home Office kind of airwave system that's being delayed, and how all of that fits together and what the risks are in there. I think that might be something that would be worthy of a separate discussion on, and bring us up to speed on that. That's also critical if all that emergency mobile communication network goes down. We're all in deep trouble. So I think something that allows us to understand the significance of that, understand the current risks and what's being proposed and what we're doing about it, that would be helpful. Perhaps leave that with you and Lynn or John to take forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from anybody? No, nothing. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. That's appreciated. And we'll not. I think you have to stay, don't you, for desk? I was just going to say if you want to go, but no, don't go. Don't go. You can't go yet. Item 4.2 then is the integrated assurance statement, annual report from John.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the paper as read, but just as a reminder, this is the second time we've done this piece of work. Last year was effectively our trial for doing this, and it was really well received by members, but also from Audit Scotland, who really praised it as something a bit new and innovative, which we're very thankful of. But really just to remind you and highlight the reason why we're doing this, as we've described before today, I think there's a very complex landscape within the authority in Police Scotland, and there's so much assurance out there. So the purpose of this is to bring together all of that assurance that you'll see. A lot of it's been earlier in this committee discussed from internal and external audit, but as well HMICS and management themselves being the first line of defence. So bringing all that together in one place for members and their accountable officer to inform our governance statement for the year end. That's just a little bit of context, and I'm happy just to go straight to any questions that you have.
Okay, Paul, you've got a question, I think, or a comment.
Yeah, just very quickly, does this statement, lock, stock and barrel, get dropped into the annual report?
Effectively, yes. It's really part of our evidence for informing the annual report. So when you see the annual report and accounts, there are different sections on the systems of internal controls. So part of this is talking about our integrated assurance statement, highlighting specifically as well internal audit, HMICS, and most importantly, of course, management controls. So yes, this is the basis for us coming to a conclusion in the ARA.
Right, thanks. Not simple as that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's useful. Thank you. Lynn, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just want to mention John touched on it. This is the second year. It was very well received last year. It was so well received that Audit Scotland pulled it out as an example of best practice in their report. So I think that shouldn't be ignored. It is groundbreaking and a very easy way to understand the whole assurance framework, which can be complicated. So, but what it's saying is that, setting that aside, it's saying that there's no areas really to be concerned about, is what I would summarise with it. Thank you.
Yeah, very useful indeed, and good to see something so sharp and focused. So thank you. Katrina, you wanted to come in?
Thank you. Yes, well, very briefly, I just wanted to, yes, it did look. I remember the previous one, and my response to this is the same as before. It's really clear and it's really helpful, and I really appreciate it. It's a great overview. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to keep that beside us as our Bible, I think. Thanks, Katrina. Okay, if nobody has anything else on 4.2, the next item is the year-end performance assessment, and that's Lynn to present that one.
Just bear with me. I'm having a bit of an issue getting into my papers, so I'm looking at them on the public line. So if you just bear with me, I bring this up in front of me. Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. This is our it's our year-end performance assessment, and I'll probably just focus on around the section 2, which is the report set out in Appendix A. It sets out the achievement of our business plan milestones, a summary of the milestones not achieved in the year, and a forward look into 23-26 based on our corporate strategy. So the key point for me is that 86% of our milestones have been delivered. 87% of our objectives have been delivered, and there's 139 milestones attached to that. There's about 14% haven't been, and what I will say is we have incorporated them into our work plan for 23-24, and there were really sound reasons as to why they weren't being delivered, and that's set out in the appendices. So for me, a positive outcome. It shows that there are stretch targets. And that we are picking up those key points going forward. Happy to take any questions. They're set out in the papers on the attached appendix.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Does anybody have any questions? I think it shows just what can be done with a very small team, you know, but this is a testament to the work of that team, and to your own leadership, Lynn, and to the work that John does as well. So thank you very much for this report. It's reassuring, and got a lot to do going forward, and can't rest on our laurels. You wanted to come back in, Lynn?
Yeah, I just want to maybe add, and it's sort of my dilemma that you have as a CEO, is that this is what's set out in our corporate plan and in our milestones, but that doesn't reflect everything that's done, doesn't reflect a lot of the business as usual that is just, you know, day in, day out, which if it was not delivered would also be an issue. So I just want to make that point. There are significant pieces of work that you wouldn't pick up on that, but they are being delivered on as well, or there would be an impact on the effectiveness of the organisation.
No, this isn't all that you do, but it's good to know that all of this is done and more. So yeah, thank you very much. No questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 4.4, the ARAC annual report. So the report on the committee. John, is that you?
Yes, it is again, Chair. Just briefly, this is again a requirement for audit committees to complete an annual report and an assessment, which we do based on the Scottish Government's Audit Committee Handbook. So we completed that checklist similar to we did in previous year. But what we were really keen to do is go a little bit beyond that. So when we look at that Scottish Government checklist, it's quite short. There's some basic things, and effectively we're meeting all the criteria. So we really wanted to challenge ourselves a bit more. And we looked to some of the other guidance that are out there. And for the first time, we completed a much more detailed National Audit Office checklist. It ran to, I think, nearly 200 questionnaires of areas that are essential practice, but also areas of best practice. And I'm really happy to say that against that checklist, we perform as an ARAC really quite well. We meet all of the essential criteria, bar one, which we are investigating. And the majority of the best practice areas we're also performing really well against. So going forward, that's something we'd like to focus on, some of those areas of best practice that we don't do at the minute, which we could progress in the future, and we'll take that on board. So happy to take any questions again.
Yep, thank you. Any questions? I have to say I was impressed yesterday by the 4 committee chairs who were able to give summaries of what their committees had been doing off the cuff, or it looked as though it was off the cuff, and I was very impressed. So if I get asked the same question at a future meeting, I shall have this to hand. Yeah, oh, we do all of this, and we do it very well. In relation to on a serious point, in relation to the the one criterion of the NEO tool that we don't comply with, to do with supply chain and shared service arrangements. Is there something that we could do jointly with Police Scotland that would support the committee to address that particular gap, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And to this point, so the point that was made is assurances of the risk and control environment of any area that is outsourced or provided by an external partner. Now, there are actually probably things that do happen. So, for example, with cleaning and janitorial services that are provided by an external partner, we do have KPIs in place and there are contract arrangements in place, but we don't necessarily see any assurances, and we don't yet have arrangements to manage that. Not to say that they're not happening, but we're having that conversation to procurement to see what we can do and bring to ARAC. So something for development.
Well, it's always good to have our homework set for us. So now we know that's an area we need to do more on. So thank you very much. Anything further on that one? If not, item 4.5 is the evaluation of committee effectiveness generally that we've been doing. And again, that's back to you, John.
Yes, and I'll just take this one read. We've spent a lot of time on this in discussions between committees. Just go straight to any questions.
Has it been a useful exercise, do you think?
Chair, I think it has been, particularly, you'll see, we've had a lot of good discussions on transparency across committees, and you'll have seen that's led to some quite interesting changes in legal committee in particular, but also even for ARAC ourselves. You have challenged us for some of the papers that we're taking in private, and rightly so. Some of those have resulted in changes where we're now considering more business in public than we have in the past. So it has been a very useful exercise, and that's a good example of how the exercise has led to actual change in the authority.
That's good, and it's good to know that each committee discharged its responsibilities in terms of their terms of reference. So that's a good place to be. In terms of our own committee, John, we did speak earlier about potentially having a development day or half day, so that we could look at where we go from here and what lies ahead. Is that something that's still in the planning stage?
Yes, it is. I think Karen's been trying to help arrange possible dates, which is where we've had some problems.
Yeah, finding dates is always the problem.
There are areas that we've talked about earlier in this meeting about oversight of change, which is an area of topic which would be quite useful to discuss, as well as maybe some of the developments from the NEO's committee effectiveness checklists are some areas that we'd like to take forward and be quite useful to discuss at a development day. So yes, if we can get time over the next couple months, those would be quite useful things to do.
That's great. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to a date being agreed for that. And our final item of business in the public session of the meeting then is item 5, our work plan for the committee. The only comment I would have is to note that we may have to change the date of the meeting in September, which is the meeting where we'll be considering the annual report and accounts. I think it's really important that we're definitely going to be quorate for such a meeting, and it's a date that's not suitable for some members. So we might look at changing it, but just at the edges, just within a day or so of that particular date. But Karen is also working on that, so good luck with that one, Karen. Anything else on the particular items of work that are delegated to each of the committees, each of the meetings? Just note this. Well, thank you. That brings to the end out the public business, and we have just a couple of items in the private session, but